The Royals are in the middle of another losing streak as April comes to a close. What do we think about it? We'll talk about it next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can follow me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can find us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you are a first-time listener, welcome in. We love new listeners here on the Locked On Royals channel. And if you want to know a little bit more about me, I work in radio here in Kansas City at Sports 10 WHB. I do some co-hosting, I do some hosting, and some producing. So I stay pretty busy in the sports world. But of course, you regulars already know that. But you do know that when you come to this podcast, when you click on this link, you are getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. And questions and comments can always be left on YouTube or they can be left on Twitter. Before we dive into our first segment, I want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full effect right now. Baseball, of course, is nearing the end of April. So stop wasting time and go get set up on FanDuel and start placing your bets and winning some money before you waste any more time, I guess I should say. So when you go over to FanDuel, we got a code we're going to give you here coming up in about 20 to 25 minutes or so. And that way you can have a big time payout when you are placing your bets on whatever you may be interested in. All right, well, the Royals lost 3 in a row, or they have lost 3 in a row. They fall to Toronto tonight, 6-5. They had the tying run 90 feet from home plate, but come up short. And I think what you can take from this game and these last 3 is a lot what you can take away from the previous 3-game losing streak, which was, that's right, 1 week ago. It has been a week that has toyed with a lot of people's emotions. You have a 3-game losing streak followed by a 4-game winning streak followed by a 3-game losing streak and counting. So I get it. For anybody that wants to overreact, I totally get it. This has not been kind to the heart. It's been hard for me to stay really level with watching this team and trying not to get too high, get too low. They have not made it easy on anybody because they've had a 7-game winning streak. They have had a 3-game losing streak, a 4-game winning streak, a 3-game losing streak. They aren't just going win, loss, loss, win. There's a lot of streaks involved here. But no matter what the outcome is tomorrow, when it's Cole Reagans and Jose Barrios for round 2, the Royals will have a winning month. And they will have a winning month by, at worst, 3 games. There'll be 3 games over 500. And it was very important for this team to get off to a hot start in April. And especially with the way the American League Central has looked through the first month of the season. They have 4 teams that are over 500. I believe, unless things have changed tonight, it's the only division in baseball with 4 teams over 500. Now, the easy dispute would be, well, one of the teams in your division is one of the worst in baseball. But you go back to last year, there were 4 teams that were under 500 at one point. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, there were 4 teams at the end of the year that were under 500. The Twins were the only one that were over 500. So it was vital for the Royals to get off to a hot start, not just for the way the Central has looked, but I think for the fan base's interest in the team and their expectation of the team. They didn't have the luxury of walking out of April at 10-21. Nobody would have believed that they had made any changes or they were playing any different. The way I will walk away from April, one is at least impressed by the pitching. I think the starting rotation has been significantly better. Anybody who's not even really closely following the team would know that this team is much, much better than last year. I mean, they are miles ahead of last year's team. And for those out there saying, well, the same old Royals, it's not. And I think that deep down, it's not. The games they're losing, though frustrating, right? Any loss is going to be frustrating. It doesn't make my night. It doesn't make this podcast better when they lose. But when they lose, it's not like last year. There were games last year in April. They would be out of it by the first 4 batters of their opponent facing them. They'd be done. They'd be cooked. It'd be 2-0, 3-0, and you knew that game was over. Tonight, yeah, incredibly frustrating. Every time the Royals got close, the Blue Jays just extended the lead by 1. And the Royals would homer, and they'd get close, and then the Blue Jays would homer. And we're going to talk about Jonathan Bowlan's to start tonight, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It wasn't good. He didn't even go 3 innings. But there was something that I am intrigued by that could play at some point later on this year. But at the end of the day, it's all about perspective, right? You've heard me say perspective over and over and over again with this podcast. And though it may not be the strongest of finishes to this month, that is win or lose tomorrow, you leave a winning month. And that is one out of the way. You have a winning month, and on top of that, a winning month that matters. It's not a winning month in September when you already had 95 losses going into that month, right? That, to me, though important for the players, it's not meaningful to the fans. Nobody cares if you go over 500 in the month of September when you are 40 games below. This was important to get off to a hot start. And I said after the first 32 games, which tomorrow will be 32 games, I said I'll take 14 and 18 because that was you weathering the storm of a really tough stretch. And that tough stretch continues this weekend and then next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday's games. You get the Texas Rangers, the reigning world champions, and the red-hot Milwaukee Brewers at Kauffman Stadium. That's after you return home from Toronto. Then you're going to get the Angels, who are not good whatsoever. You get the Mariners, who are a good team I still have very high hopes for, but have gotten off to a slower start, have recently caught on of late. Then you're going to have Oakland sub 500. And you're going to get Detroit again. Then you're going to get, I believe, Minnesota. You go to Target Field for the first time. So teams that you might be able to take advantage of again. But to me, what was so important about this first month was hanging in there, making sure you're not swept, making sure your 3-game losing streak doesn't turn into 9 or 10 or to 11. You know, we discussed this 1 week ago today. In fact, it was another night episode. I was coming back from Kauffman Stadium. The 2013 Royals had a complete fall off after they were 17 and 10. So this team and the 2013 Royals were 17 and 10. The month of May was disastrous for them. Absolutely awful. They went from 17 and 10 to 22 and 30 in about 4 weeks. And we know what that 2013 Royals team ended up like. You know, they were 86 and 76? 10 games over 500, and fun baseball all throughout. They got really hot in the summer. Everything started to gel. And we're going to get into a very intriguing segment in segment number 2 here. But to me, I don't see you looking up in the standings and they're going to be 22 and 30. I'd imagine that they are going to be able to even this out a little bit, and you're not going to see, 7, 8, 9 game winning streaks. You're not going to see these ridiculous ones where you have these stretches of, 8-game winning streak, 4-game losing streak, followed by a 3-game winning streak, followed by a 5-game losing. I don't think it's going to be that hot and cold for this team. I think there is going to be a leveling out effect, and that's going to mean they're not going to be as hot as that 7-game stretch in April. But hopefully they do. Hopefully they find another part this season where they can win 7 in a row when it matters, by the way. But also I think this leveling out is important. Just taking series, being competitive, and hanging right in there. And that, to me, I think is my biggest takeaway. That even in these losses, there have been, I think, 3, in my opinion. I think there have been 3 losses of the 13 they have. Is that right? 13 losses? Of their 13 losses, 3 of them have been, or maybe it's 14. Is it 14 losses? I think it's 13. Yeah, it's 13 losses right now. But 3 of those 13 have been not really competitive games. It was that first game of the Mets series, they lose 6-1. Then it was that shutout against Baltimore on Sunday, or that was last Sunday, 5-0. And then this previous Sunday was the Tigers and the Royals. They lost by 3, but they were down 4-1, and it just felt like a mountain to climb, really, of those 3 runs. And one of those was a save situation. The other one, it wasn't really a blowout until the final innings. It was like 2-0 Baltimore for a little bit of time until, I think, the 6th inning. And that Mets series, the first game of that They led 1-0 at one point. So to me, that has been my most positive takeaway, that these losses are not your typical Royals losses. And tonight, I'm not going to give them flowers for losing a baseball game, but I can stomach 6-5. You had a 2-0 lead. It evaporated 3 batters into Toronto's lineup. It wasn't like you had a lead. Saturday night, to me, was the infuriating loss. And I think you go back to that one and go, if we were 18-10, you lose Sunday 18-11. It doesn't feel that bad losing tonight. But the fact that you now have 3 in a row instead of just 2 in a row, and you've won 18 of your first 30, though it's a 1-game difference, it's just feeling better about a road series win coming off a series win against Toronto, and then you're heading off for your final 3 of this road trip. That's just kind of where I'm at. But again, win or lose tomorrow, it's a winning month. Then you turn the calendar and you got to start that thing all over again. You don't want to have a bottoming out in May where then you look up and you're 8, 9, 10 games below 500. You got to stay the course, especially with how good the American League Central has been for the first month of the season. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, let's talk about some of these guys in a slump. What is going on, and is there a chance, like I said with the bullpen, like I said with this team in general, things can just even out, and you're not going to see a bunch of 0 for 30s. We'll talk about that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can follow me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, want to give a shout out to a couple of the sponsors today, and we are going to start it off with DoorDash. Want to make mom smile? Start Mother's Day with flowers or surprise her with gifts from the brand she loves, delivered the very same day with DoorDash. Remember that moms are a gift, so give her the best this Mother's Day. You can get gifts as thoughtful as she is with DoorDash. Select from hundreds of expertly crafted bouquets to the best of tech to self-care essentials and more, delivered right to her door. So you can get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off your next order with up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB. Order using DoorDash today, and again, those terms apply. We also want to give a shout out to the other sponsor today, and Monopoly Go. You've heard me talk about them countless times over the last 2 weeks or so, and yes, it is one of the more fun mobile games out there. Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Well, we know about this team at this point. They are 30 games in, exactly. I jumped the gun, 10 more games, which would be the beginning part of May. We know roughly who some of these players are. We know roughly who these players are going to become come summertime and hopefully toward the end of the season. And we've also become very accustomed to these massive slumps that have taken some guys' batting average down 100 points. And I know batting average isn't everything, but it's the first thing your eye goes to because it's the first stat they bring up on the broadcast. It's right there for you to see. Just like with pitchers, it's ERA. You don't really look to strikeout percentage, walk percentage, innings pitched. You look right at the ERA. If it's above 5, probably not very good. If it's below 5, doable. For a batting average, if it's above, in my opinion, 260, you're hitting pretty good. You're below 260, you're kind of getting on the area of maybe not the best hitter in the lineup. But what's been so infuriating about this offense is they never can get on the same page. With the players they need to get on the same page, they're completely out of sync. Like when Michael Garcia to begin the year was red hot. Bobby Witt Jr. was hot. Salvador Perez was hot. MJ Melendez was hot. Nelson Velasquez was hot. But then Vinny Pasquantino wasn't. And to me, that was the guy that I had the most faith in, just not going through bad slumps. Well, then Vinny Pasquantino gets hot, and Salvador Perez stays hot. And then MJ Melendez and Michael Garcia go into bad slumps. And not just you're 3 for your last 15. We're talking 0 for 25. We're talking black hole in the lineup. Okay, so then Michael Garcia gets hot again. Well, MJ Melendez is still in his slump. Nelson Velasquez is still in his slump. And now Vinny Pasquantino's in a slump. And again, it's not I'm 1 for my last 10. It's I'm 0 for my last 22. I mean, just jarring numbers that it almost makes you go, I'm impressed that this offense from time to time is doing as okay as it is with guys that are performing like that. Some of it is bad luck. Some of it is just not seeing the ball well. And that to me can be the frustrating part of this. I mean, we were just talking about it a week ago, how hot Vinny Pasquantino was at the plate. And now he can't buy a hit. You know, MJ Melendez, who's back on the homestand, the beginning game against Baltimore, you kind of felt like he was back a little bit. Had that big 3-run home run in game 1 and then had a couple of more hits, had a couple of more walks, and then ice cold again. He has 1 hit on the road this year. And I do feel like a lot of those things are going to even out. You know, some guys that struggle in April, they're going to be fine. You know, Hunter Renfroe is hitting in the 140s now. You know, Michael Massey's now under 200. He just got back, so I'm not going to really hold that to him. Kyle Isbell's heating up, and you go, man, this is great that your 9-hole hitter is heating up. But now there's other guys in 0 for 20 stretches. And that can just drive you mad. That can drive you mad as a fan. That can drive you mad as somebody that covers the team. It is rightfully infuriating because you feel like if just some of these guys are in mild slumps, the offense is going to be just fine. Like, I'm amazed that this offense put up 5 runs tonight without Salvador Perez. Vinny didn't have a hit. MJ Melendez didn't have a hit. You know, some guys just couldn't come through with guys on base. You know, Michael Garcia had a brutal pop-up with first and third with a tying run at third base all the way back in the 4th inning. The Royals didn't tie it up after that. But he also had 2 hits on the night. So I guess you take it in doses. I mean, it's how fitting is it? The team has been so hot and cold. 7-game winning streak, 3-game losing streak, 4-game winning streak, 3-game losing streak. It's only fitting, right? And probably goes hand in hand with those numbers that you have some hitters that are red hot or ice cold. There hasn't really been an in-between. You have guys that have completely bottomed out and guys that are red hot at the plate. The only guy who stayed consistent is Salvador Perez. Your oldest guy in the lineup has been your best hitter from start to finish. So, is it cause for concern? I feel like there can be concern because I don't believe some of these guys get out of slumps. That, unfortunately, is the harsh reality. Not awful slumps. I don't see Vinny Pasquantino having many 0 for 20 stretches, but think about how weird that is. Twice in the month of April, he's had a really bad stretch like this. And maybe some of it's bad luck. Maybe some of it is he's not seeing the ball that well. But he also had this stretch where he was one of the hottest hitters in the league. So that's the hot and cold effect. I am concerned about Nelson Velasquez. I am concerned a little bit now about MJ Melendez. I'm concerned about Hunter Renfroe. I'm concerned that, can Michael Massey really get back into the swing of things? Can he show the player that you need him to be every day at second base? These are all things that are going to be in people's minds until they prove you it's not a problem. Because we talked about this in spring training, that some guys will get the benefit of the doubt, some guys will not. Right? I think if Bobby Witt Jr. started cold, he's going to be fine. He's an MVP candidate. If Michael Garcia started a little bit cold, like he did, or at least was in a bad stretch, didn't have the complete benefit of the doubt, but I think some people went, he's going to be all right. Same with Vinny Pasquantino. Unfortunately, MJ Melendez doesn't have that grace. Nelson Velasquez does not. Kyle Isbell does not. Hunter Renfroe did not. Michael Massey does not. Bottom of the order hitters, guys that are after the top 4, they don't get that grace. And I think they are fully aware of that, which I think you can see the pressing from time to time. MJ Melendez and Nelson Velasquez were hot at the same time, and they went ice cold at the exact same time. Kyle Isbell's now getting a little bit hotter, but he was ice cold for a while. So those things I feel like we'll get a little bit more even. I don't think you're going to have 3 or 4 guys in your lineup going 0 for 20 or 0 for 25. But that is up to the hitter. That is up to, getting into good stretches and really, feeling like you found rhythm. I mean, we saw in that Toronto series last week, Michael Garcia homered, Kyle Isbell homered. Both have been great since. That was kind of their breakout. You need something else to go right for some of these guys. I thought maybe Nelson Velasquez getting a fielding gaff aided double in the first inning might have been the wake-up call, because then he got hit by a pitch. He's on base twice to start the game. I thought Hunter Renfroe had a really good swing in his second at bat of the game. You kind of feel like one of those guys is going to get going. MJ Melendez scorched 2 balls, then was inches from a double in the 8th inning. None of them were hits. And that can be very frustrating, but somebody's got to get the booty knock. Somebody's got to get the bloop single, the ground ball with eyes. And hopefully it's 3 guys in one game so they can get out of these really bad slumps. But definitely something that makes you rip your hair out as the Royals lose tonight 6-5. They've lost 3 in a row. That is their second 3-game losing streak in the month of April, but they also have winning streaks of 7 and 4 in that month. Okay, we're going to move on to our final segment, but before we do that, let's give a shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Again, it's streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Powered to the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For our final segment, I want to give some thoughts and a breakdown of Jonathan Bowlan's start tonight. It wasn't good, but I think there is something to like about his arm. We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, I want to give a shout out to the final sponsor today in FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL, and baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, Jonathan Bowlan made the spot start tonight in front of Alec Marsh, who's on the 15-day injured list with an elbow contusion. I would guess Jonathan Bowlan gets one more start. That would be on Sunday against the Texas Rangers in the middle of their 6-game homestand, I believe that is. I really didn't walk away disgusted by 4 runs in less than 3 innings. He gave up 3 long balls in this game, 2 of them to the one hitter in Justin Turner. But I got to be honest with you. I think there is something in Jonathan Bowlan's arsenal that intrigues me as a back-end guy. We saw him hit 97 multiple times that outing, even toward the end of it. I saw him hit 99 once, which I think was registered at 98.5 on Baseball Savant. But it gave me an idea that when Alec Marsh returns, right, he's going to get the 5th spot back. That's not really going to be up for debate. He was pitching well before that. It's an elbow contusion. It's probably pretty sore right now. Probably still has a nasty bruise. He's going to be back. Likely will miss one more start, and then Jonathan Bowlan, my guess is that he's going to be optioned by AAA where he'll continue to start. Because Tyler Duffy, it kind of feels like, has moved into a role that the Royals are going to value while Jordan Lyles is still away from the team. But you have a 97 to 98 mile an hour fastball there when he's stretched out. And I do think tonight some of it was adrenaline. That he's probably going to sit most of the time 94 to 95. And some of the times the adrenaline was there where it was 96, 97, 98. But now I think about this. At the big league level, the adrenaline's going to be there for a young pitcher. Until it becomes, just consistent. It's a rhythm. It's just 96, 97, 98. He's a big dude as well. He's 6'6", 265. So there's a reason he's got a little extra power behind that fastball. He's got the frame for it. But I look at this Royals bullpen, and I think there are guys that are settling into roles. That Angel Serpa was great tonight in the one batter he faced. He hit 97 3 times. So that velocity is starting to have an uptick. Matt Sauer wasn't anything special, but this is a Rule 5 guy pitching in his first high leverage spot, went 2 innings, gave up 1 run. Tyler Duffy was pretty dang good after coming in for Bowlan in a really tight spot. And then Nick Anderson battled around 2 runners. That's kind of been the theme for Nick Anderson, is deals with base runners, but might get out of the inning clean. But I look at this bullpen and go, if they really want to take it to the next level, they are going to need some high-powered guys. They're going to need the guys that can come in there, 1-run game. I'm pumping 98, 99, 100 with control. Thought Will Klein was really good in that series finale against Detroit. He had 2 strikeouts in a clean, perfect frame. Then he got optioned back to Omaha so that Jonathan Bowlan could start in this game. So the question becomes, when Alec Marsh returns, who is going to be the one sent back? I guess it's going to be Bowlan. I'm not sure about Tyler Duffy and his options. That might factor in here. But I would look to the summertime and look at Jonathan Bowlan. If this Royals rotation stays healthy, there's no spot in the rotation if they're healthy. Everybody is pitching just fine and nobody's going to lose their spot. That can always change, but you're hoping by the time summer rolls around, the 5 guys in the rotation are still pitching well enough to hold their jobs. I look at a 1-inning spot in the bullpen, and Jonathan Bowlan may be taking that spot. Carlos Hernandez is also close to coming back as well. He's another high-velocity guy that can give you some swing-and-miss stuff. But if Jonathan Bowlan can make it to the big leagues and succeed, I think it's as a back-end guy. And he's also got good control. Tonight, not great control, but in his minor league career, he hasn't walked too many guys. You know, he can strike out anywhere from 8 to 10 guys per 9, but probably walking under 3 guys per 9. And when you throw that hard, that's going to work out for you. I think there is a role for the Royals and, Jonathan Bowlan at some point this year. And I think it's going to be in meaningful spots. And it would, I think, really thrill me if you saw Jonathan Bowlan get called up at one point this year, likely after they have seen the last of some of the guys they brought in, or maybe Jonathan Bowlan takes the spot of Tyler Duffy. Maybe it is something where they really like what they saw and they feel like, hey, there's a spot in this bullpen for him, because he gives you that flexibility of being able to go more than 1 inning. But if it is just let it eat for 1 inning, man, I think there's a scenario in which he could reach 100. And then you have Hernandez back. Maybe Will Klein joins that bullpen. Now you see this group shift from a lot of the guys that are maybe not as dominant as you'd like them to be to a couple of guys that can really run it up there. Now, velocity is not everything. If you throw it hard and down the middle, guys are going to put it over the fence like it happened tonight. I mean, Jonathan Bowlan had a couple of firm fastballs at 97 and 98 that were crushed by Blue Jays hitters. But to me, it intrigued me enough where I saw the high velocity and at times the control and a really good slider after that slider to Justin Turner that he put over the wall for a 2-run home run in the first inning. There was some good bite to it. Got the changeup, not as well located, but I can see the movement for it. And that's kind of what I'm seeing with him. Now, I saw somebody bring this up to me on Twitter that, Jonathan Bowlan reminds him a little bit of Alec Marsh last year, where you saw the stuff and went, there's enough to work with there. There's some swing and miss stuff, but he's giving up long balls, and you kind of feel like, if he just could let it go for 1 inning, you're seeing 97, 98, 99, 100. I think Jonathan Bowlan, though, just based off what the rotation has looked like, is going to have an opportunity on this team, but not in a rotation. Not on the team that's trying to compete for a playoff spot this year. I think you're going to probably have to see him in the back end of a bullpen. And maybe that is a dream scenario that Bowlan goes back down to Omaha. He's still starting, but he comes back up, starts off in a 2 to 3 inning roll. And then the better he gets, you could see him in a 1-run game in the 6th inning and needs to go 2. Kind of the way we saw with Angel Serpa. Now, Serpa's in a spot right now. They trust him in a 1-run game in the 6th inning or the 7th inning. He's been a better left-handed thrower than Will Smith, something we didn't really expect coming into the year. But that's something I could see for Jonathan Bowlan. It was not a good start by any means tonight, but the stuff I think was encouraging enough to look into the future a little bit and find some role for him. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and you can always follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. Before we say goodbye for the night, I want to give a shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app. Tomorrow, we're probably going to give another breakdown of this game between Jose Barrios and Cole Reagans, if the Royals can snap that losing streak, and maybe dive into some more of these offensive numbers of the guys that are slumping. or some guys we can expect to turn it around in May. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.